We're going to now move to our first high-level roundtable number 1. And having heard from key government ministers, we now turn our attention to the major players in the international and national oil company sector who are meeting the challenge to bring modern energy services to the world, of course. We want to bring that panel up as we go along. Yeah. Wolfgang, we're okay?
We're going to hear from all of the big key players here. We're going to hear from Shell, BP, Total Energy, NNPC, KPC, and of course Aramco. But we'll just let them get the housekeeping out of the way here. But it should take them, hopefully, just another. We'll give them maybe 30 seconds, John, huh?
Okay. Well, that gives us a chance to discuss exactly what OPEC did over the weekend, right? The 548,000 barrels came as a surprise. It had people very flat-footed. But I thought the fact that...
you put that point to him.
And he said, if there was such a panic, why didn't we see that response coming within the energy market today? And it hasn't. It was been digested by the market. So we're going to go ahead and call our speakers up. I love the attention to detail. Let's bring up first the president and CEO of Aramco. Can we give him a warm welcome? His Excellency Amin Nasser. Thanks very much.
Okay, where is he? He is in the house. Amin Nasser is going to join us. And yes, he'll be in seat number 2 to the right there. Yes, we'll bring the moderator up in just a moment.
Let's welcome Sheikh Nawaf Al Sabah, Deputy Chair and Chief Executive Officer of Kuwait Petroleum Company. A warm welcome to him. Thanks. I saw you sitting next to His Excellency as well. Thanks.
We're delighted to have with us the Group CEO from NNPC, Engineer Bashir Bayo Ojulari. And he is here indeed.
Congratulations on the recent appointment as Chief Executive, Mr.
And they've been
Ojulari.
busy,
yes,
very
absolutely.
busy, delivering the goods already.
The CEO of BP, Murray Auchincloss, is here in the room. Nice to see you, Murray.
From Shell, we have the CEO, Wael Sawan.
And the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Total Energies, Patrick Pouyanné.
So this is our tremendous CEO lineup. We're really, really looking forward to this. And let's get our moderator on the stage. He is the President and CEO of the Global Center for Energy Analysis. Joe McMonagle is going to moderate the CEO panel.
45 minutes.
Yes.
No more.
Okay.
No more.
Thank you, Joe. We'll hand it over to you.
You hear me? Oh, there we go. Welcome, everybody. We just heard from the ministers, the board of directors, if you will. Now we're going to hear from the CEOs and the CEO representatives here. We have 3 CEOs from IOCs and 3 from NOCs. So we have a very interesting group. I think collectively they represent about 22 million barrels a day in production in oil. So we've got the right players here on stage with me. So I want to just start talking a little bit about the market outlook for oil this year and next year. And I'll ask everyone to give us your comment on it, because you approach it from a very unique perspective, a commercial perspective, if you will. And Amin, since you're the top of the list of producers at this group here, I'll ask you to go first with your views of oil markets this year and next year. How do you see things?
Thank you. And I think in spite of the trade challenges and the tariffs and the impact on the global economy, as a result of that, we still see a healthy global oil demand that translated into the first quarter. We've seen approximately 1.5 million barrel of crude growth. Our expectation for the rest of the year to average around 1.2 to 1.3 million barrels of demand growth, driven by demand not only in developing countries, but we've seen gasoline spike in the US. We've seen also China still, there is additional demand in China. We've seen it driven mainly in China by the petrochemical industry and the jet fuel. We've seen it in India. The rest of the developing countries, there is still growth. And our expectation that will continue. We should not forget that most of the growth that we will be seeing is coming from developing countries, and that's why it will continue over the long term. The utilization per capita in these developing countries is 1 to 2 barrels per capita compared to 9 barrels per capita in Europe and 22 barrels per capita in the US. So that demand growth will continue. So we see a healthy global demand, and it will continue to increase over the longer term.
Sheikh Nawaf?
Thank you. I agree wholeheartedly with my brother, Nasser. I'll add a couple of things, some of them which will be anecdotal just to put more flesh onto that. We agree that demand remains healthy despite headwinds coming on to the economic situation. The numbers that we have are quite similar to what Mr. Nasser mentioned. However, I'll add on to that. On the supply side, I just don't see the additional non-OPEC supply coming in at a rate that would exceed the demand numbers that we're talking about. I'm seeing continued strength in demand, despite some reports coming out to the contrary. But I see from an anecdotal perspective, every year when I visit our major partners, especially in East Asia, most recent visit was a couple months ago with our Chinese partners and the others in the region, in Japan and Korea. They are all asking for a number of things. First, they say, please don't cut any of the allocations that you have to us if there is a cut. And second, if you have additional barrels, please send them. And that's an indication that this is still a balanced market. It's a market that may face different headwinds come the end of the year as the summer driving season moves towards the fall and winter. But I still see the demand being relatively healthy on that point. And the indication from that is when the last OPEC plus increase came in at a faster rate than originally planned, as Minister al-Mazrou'i eloquently mentioned today. The market reaction is actually quite positive, and that is an indication to what both of us have been saying now.
Bashir, you're the new member of this group here on stage, the new CEO of NNPC. Give us your view of global energy markets this year and next year.
All right, thank you very much. Again, great pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation, our Secretary. I think what we've seen again in Nigeria is that the demand that has been coming through this year continue to be undersupplied. At least quite a number of demands, either for NLNG into Europe or to the Far East. We still see that we are unable to meet those full demands. So overall, I think demand remains quite healthy. It looks like it's growing. And I think we need to really indeed balance that demand with the appropriate investment to ensure that the supplies can actually meet those demands. Despite the diversifications I've been talking about, we haven't seen any or observed any major dip in the demand for hydrocarbons for Nigeria. Thank you.
Murray.
Great. Thanks for the invitation, Excellency. It's fabulous to be here. A very similar message, I suppose, on the demand side. When we look through cycle backwards and forwards, we see about 1% growth per year. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower. The headwinds we may face now are tariffs and of course, Chinese demand. But overall, we see healthy demand around that 1% level moving forward. The supply side, we do see strong growth coming in the second half of the year, 1.2 million a day coming from outside OPEC, and then of course the OPEC increases that have been talked about. But interestingly, if you look December 25 to December 26, non-OPEC is flat. So that's an interesting point in time ahead of us. Things we watch on the supply side, are there any impact from sanctions? What are the OPEC decisions that are made? And I think in particular, we're watching the lower 48 now, where 50 rigs have decreased over the past 12 months. That's around a 9 or 10% decrease in US onshore rigs. So we'll have to see how that plays out on supply. Physically, markets are tight right now, whether that's for oil, gasoline, jet, or diesel. They're all quite tight with low storage levels. And China is injecting an awful lot into storage. Last comment, spec length is particularly low if you look back in history. So there are a few things to think about.
Wael, the view from Shell.
Yeah, thank you firstly, and let me also extend my appreciation to the Secretary General and all the OPEC team for what they've done today, and I'm sure for tomorrow. Little to add compared to what colleagues have already said. If I just sort of add 3 dimensions, short, medium, and long term, with a caveat that I've never ever gotten the macro right in the short or medium term. So with the full humility of that, I would say in the short term, the fundamentals look tight. There's a healthy balance between demand and supply, so very much echoing what colleagues on the panel have already said. In the medium term, it's fair to say that the uncertainty and the volatility that are driven predominantly by geopolitics and trade policies does mean that there's a wide band to look at. Whether that is going to result in disruptions to demand, disruptions to supply, difficult to call. But I would say in the, call it 1 to 2 year period, there is more questions than definitive answers. The area that I think we as a company and in general, I think the sector does well is look beyond the short-term noise and look at the fundamentals for the long term. Of course, this is a business, the oil production business is one where we continue to experience depletion rates of around 4 to 5% a year. So we need to run fast just to stay still, not to mention the incremental supply that we need to meet the growing demand. And so I do think continued investment in oil and gas for the coming years is absolutely essential if we are to meet that growing demand into the future and counter some of those depletion rates that are there. And so longer term, we continue to believe that there is going to be a strong pull on that oil that's being produced for quite some time to come.
Okay. Patrick?
Maybe because I'm the oldest one in my position, I will be a little dissonant. I like to do that. I think, okay, my view is that there have been something moving in the demand structurally, is that when you look to the last 20 years, the growth of the oil demand was mainly driven by Chinese oil growth, 700, 800,000 barrels per day per year. Now we are more in 300,000 barrels per day per year. So we have a structural lower demand from China. And of course, I hope that India and other emerging countries will replace the Chinese dynamic. But I think we need to keep that in mind. My first remarks, so of course there is continuing growth, by the way, despite all what we can hear. So growth, there is a continued growth for oil demand, more or less 0.8, 0.9, 1% per year for the last 20 years, we see that. So we need to continue to supply. On the other side, on the supply side, I think it's quite healthy because after 3 years in a row of the $80 per barrel, in fact, what we have all done in particular, which is not very much commented, we fight it against our natural decline. We made a lot of infill wells. So when you have a high price, a period of price, like it was the case, the natural decline is not 4 or 5%, it's lower than that because we invest more. And of course, today, we have to take that into account, that the support for the oil growth is in fact easier to reach. So my view is that we are entering in a period where we will have quite a good supply. The market is well supplied. By the way, honestly, I was a little surprised to see that the market went up to only to $75 per barrel few weeks ago and not higher. That means that the market is well supplied. And I think the role of the OPEC, if I have a word to say as a conclusion to the General Secretary, the role of OPEC is more important forever to stabilize the market for all of us. I think it's my conclusion.
Very interesting take on markets this year and next year. You know, maybe until about 2 years ago, we would go to energy conferences, not necessarily here, because here it's always been very forthright about the real issues facing the market. But other energy conferences around the world that we've all been to, everybody in the room has been to, the word energy security has kind of been, it used to be whispered in the hallways, but never really on on the stage. It was all about the transition and addressing climate change. But now energy security is very much an important term that a lot of people are focusing on, and ministers that were just on stage before us focus on. So I'm wondering, Amit, if I can ask you to examine the role of energy security alongside the transition and sustainability, and what role does oil and gas, hydrocarbons in general, play in the transition?
Thank you. You know, oil and gas in particular is important as part of the energy mix for the long term. And energy security needs oil and gas, because if you look at, when we talk about transition, if you look at solar, wind, and alternatives, they only constitute 5% of the primary energy. They are intermittent in nature, and that's why they are heavily dependent on oil and gas. So if you want an energy security, you need to ensure you have the mix that is available, that is reliable, and that's where our investment. We are proud to say always that we are reliable at 99.8% or 99.9% when it comes to delivery to our customers. So if you need energy security, you need to ensure you have the right mix that will ensure that it is, while secure, it's affordable and sustainable. And affordability is an important. That's why in the world today you see, because of energy security concern, because it's also indigenous in certain countries, coal is rising. Coal is at 8.8 billion ton. So that we were supposed to phase out with gas and all of that and power generation with more gas coming into the market. But coal is picking up, and the reason is people have started looking at energy security. Coal is affordable, to low cost. It is indigenous in certain countries, it's available, and it gives them the right security. So it came a little bit ahead of the sustainability for these countries. If you look at, for example, in China, they are the biggest investor in renewable globally. But at the same time, they are investing in coal because coal gives them the continuity. Solar, wind, intermittent power generation. You need a sustainable power 24 hours a day. So that's where the investment in coal is coming. So security is coming now at a high stake because people are seeing what's happening globally. Any interruption will impact your energy supply. And if it impacts energy supply, it will impact your economy big time. And that's why you need to ensure that you have the right mix of energy in oil, gas, hydrocarbons, fossil fuels in general, while at the same time building solar and wind. If you look at the kingdom, we are a big investor in renewable. We're talking about 100 to 130 gigawatts by 2030. But at the same time, if you look at our gas, we are growing gas by more than 60% by 2030. So, and it's all being used mostly in the kingdom, not for export. So we need to understand that when we talk about energy security, while we're building, we talk about renewable, how much we spend in renewable so far, 12 trillion. I used to say 10 trillion a couple of months back, but if you add 2024 on how much we spend, 12 trillion. How much solar and wind or alternatives today? 5% of the energy, of the primary energy. If you talk, everybody talks about electric vehicles. How much is it? 5%. 95% still conventional vehicles. So, as I said, you need to invest. You need to have a balanced way of looking at the transition. You need to take into consideration energy security, not only for the global north, but also for the global south. And that is important and critical. There is His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz today talked about almost 15% of the population globally with no proper access to secure energy. And in reality, it might be much higher than that. It might be 20 to 25% of the global population. So we need to take that into consideration and provide, while secure, reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy to the world.
Sheikh Nawaf, do you have a view from Kuwait on the role of hydrocarbons in the transition and energy security?
Sure. looking at security and sustainability, we see them as complementary. We don't see them as mutually exclusive or even as a trade-off. As Minister Rumi mentioned on the previous panel, we are making the investments to ensure that we have the lowest cost and also the lowest carbon intensity barrel that is produced worldwide. Why are we continuing to make those investments? It's because we see the current energy mix coming in at around 600 exajoules of power needed, and that's going to increase to about 900 exajoules by 2050. That's a 50% increase in energy consumption and demand. That currently is being met today by about a third of that is oil and gas. By 2050, we expect that ratio to decrease to about a quarter. Yet that quarter of the 50% larger mix still translates to more or less the same amount of oil demand as you have today, if not more. So today, and a big thank you to the Secretary General El Reith, for always having these great turns of phrase. If you noticed in the video today, it was talking about not a clean break, but a clean synergy of mixes of fuels, and that is essentially what we believe in. So our investments will continue to position Kuwait as one of the lowest cost, if not the lowest cost, cash costs, but also carbon intensity barrel in the world. We invest about $10 billion a year in CapEx in our business, about 50 to 60% of that into the upstream alone. So that positions us to continue to meet the call on Kuwaiti crude. As Minister Rumi mentioned earlier today, we'll take our production capacity to 4 million barrels of oil a day by 2035, from the current 3 million or so in terms of capacity. That's because we are convinced that the call on Kuwaiti crude will be higher because of that changing energy mix. At the same time, though, I do want to stress the fact that throughout this energy transition, that it's got to be a just energy transition throughout the world, that the global south has to be part of the game in terms of being able to exploit their energy sources to lift populations into greater economic circles. And it's only fair and just that countries in the world that have enjoyed the Industrial Revolution all the way through should also make way for countries in the global south to do the same.
The IEF, which I used to head, and OPEC and IEA every year hosts the Energy Outlook Symposium. I call it the Battle of the Energy Outlooks. But one of the things we do in that process is to take all of the different scenarios that are out there. There's like 50 or 60 if you include company scenarios. And the one factoid that a data point we came away with, actually was pointed out by Minister Ben Ali when we used to work together at the IEF, was the difference between the demand growth for hydrocarbons in 2050, the highest demand in 2050 for hydrocarbons, and based on all the scenarios, and the lowest demand in 2050. So the delta between those different scenarios was about 100 million barrels. So almost the size of today's oil market. And Patrick, I'm wondering if that creates a lot of uncertainty for companies, for energy ministers trying to decide roadmaps, but for leaders of companies and boards of directors, how do you deal with these uncertainties as you run your company and plan for the future?
It's good uncertainties. It's a way to make money, you know. So first, I think for us, it's quite clear. I think today, the mix of the world is a lot of oil and gas. It's the energy of today. It's what our customers want. So we need to secure security of supply is really a reality, even in Europe. It's no more only transition, because the world is fragmenting, so we want to security of supply, but also affordability. And our mission is to provide an affordable and reliable energy. It's today fundamentally oil and gas, and the way we invest, and we have a growth in our hydrocarbons trajectory of more than 3% per year until 2030, is to be selective on the type of fields that we develop. First quartile fields, so for me it's less than $20 per barrel, capex plus on OPEC, it's a rule. And if we continue to invest in this type of oil fields, I'm secured from my investors' point of view, and there are others oil and gas fields which will be higher cost. So I think it's the best way to cope with uncertainty is to be efficient in the way we allocate the capital. But and that's why, by the way, we are big investors in the regions, which was very represented this morning in the Middle East and Africa, because there we can find a lot of, I would say, cheap oil and gas. And that's good for the future. Then, of course, there is the other part of the equation, which is the transition, the renewables. And more than that, for us, it's electricity. What we are driven in our company, we are completely convinced, because in all the scenarios you mentioned, there is one common point, is that electricity demand will grow.
Right.
And quite in a strong way. Electricity it's not only intermittent electricity from renewables. People, the customers do not like that. They want reliable, affordable electricity, and there, it's gas has a huge role, gas to power. And I think the more I think to gas, it's not only a question of replacing coal or not replacing coal because of emissions. It is in fact answering to the growth of electricity demand everywhere, in OECD countries, developed countries, in emerging countries with more electricity. So we are driven by that, and that's why, in the company as well, while we continue to invest heavily in oil and gas, we also invest oil gas 4 billion per year, building an electricity business. And in 2025, 10% of the energy produced and sold by Total Energies will be electricity. And it will be 20% by 2030. So our strategy, answer to the uncertainties, is both. Let's try to do both. And I think we are quite successful, so that's the way. So diversification, answering to both markets, but keeping in mind the fundamentals. There will be no transition if we are not able to provide an affordable and reliable energy to customers, wherever they are. And this is a lesson of the last 5 years, or 10 years, including in Europe, where we want to be at the top of the transition. Customers in Europe today are driven by affordability, reliability, and that's where we have a place.
Well, speaking of electricity demand, Murray, if I can turn to you. Another hot topic at energy conferences these days is energy demand and growth in power demand from AI. And so I'm wondering what the view might be in terms of how that's going to impact energy demand forecasts going forward, what you see, and what fuels you see sort of supplying that energy demand growth. And also, you know, something Amin talks about that I love to steal from you when you give speeches, you say, yes, AI is very important, but let's not forget about AC in the developing world. And that's another, I think, big driver of demand growth. But anyway, if you can speak about that, that would be great.
Yeah, fantastic. You know, step back for just 1 second. We think we're in not really a world of transition, but energy addition. When you look at all the stats, coal's at an all-time peak, oil all-time peak in demand. And what AI is doing is starting to really push into the other energy vectors as well. Power consumption looks like from data centers will grow from 1% to 3% of global power demand. I reserve the right to update that number in 3 months' time, and in 3 months' time, and in 3 months' time. So it's a fast-moving pace. But we definitely see a huge spike in power demand. 50% of it so far is in the United States from what we see. We're the #2 power trader inside the United States. We have 5,000 customers that we provide power to, much like Patrick talked about as well. And so we see an incredible demand led by the United States right now in the businesses in which we operate. And as far as what we think the energy supply source for this is, the United States is pushing solar and wind as fast as they can. Natural gas is probably what's going to make up the shortfall in the coming years. There's an opportunity that nuclear comes in over time as well, but that's not an immediate thing. So we see up to 70% of the fuel supply for AI in the United States as being 70%. And that's why we're super pleased, because we have 30 TCF of onshore gas in the United States just waiting to fuel that increase in demand, both from LNG and from data centers. At some moment in time, it'll start to improve the energy efficiency of the system as well. And maybe two anecdotes, since I'm sitting in an oil conference, to talk about what AI is doing to our business that's really, really game-changing, both in drilling, because we like drilling at OPEC. We can now, using AI, detect kicks on exploration wells with 98% accuracy before they happen. This was undreamt of 6 weeks ago, 6 months ago. But we did it just in a well called Far South in the Gulf of America. We predicted a kick on AI, and it happened. And the teams got that with 98.5% predictability. And another example in Azerbaijan, the engineers have established a 90% improvement in the time to plan wells using Gen AI. These are dramatic impacts on the efficiency of the energy system that we operate inside drilling, and I expect great things from that moving forward to try to balance supply and affordability. So I think AI is just starting. I think demand will continue to move forward over time. And I think we're going to need all forms of energy, and natural gas seems to be the big supplier right now to feed that in the near term.
Well, how do you view AI's impact on demand, but also how are you using it in the company for efficiency and maybe reducing emissions?
Yeah, we've embraced data scientists now for just over 10 years. We've brought in around 200, 250 in the company to start that journey. So if I'm honest, we're really at the inflection point of truly understanding what is possible and trying to unlock the imagination of the company, of ourselves as leaders, to be able to embrace what AI can offer. This, in my mind, the challenge has been more of the culture challenge. The ability to be able to challenge the ways of working, the ability to be able to move from maybe legacy platforms towards some of the new opportunities that are there. So very, very early days. And as Murray rightly said, I think within 3 months, our own thinking will have evolved and will continue to grow. As it comes to how we are using AI today in areas like optimization, efficiency improvement, GHG reduction, GHG emission reductions, a big part of the focus has been optimization of existing facilities. And so we have significantly ramped up the usage of digital twins in our facilities. We have an offshore facility pretty far offshore in Australia called the Prelude LNG facility. We took our board to Australia last week, and rather than have them commute all the way there, we brought Prelude to them. Fully leveraging AI. They could walk down the stairs, they could see where our staff would be, they looked at the maintenance of the facility, to be able to embrace what it actually means being out there. It's a small window into how we could potentially continue to evolve the way we think about maintenance, the way we design facilities. And importantly, if we can become more and more efficient in the way we run those facilities, you will also have a lot less greenhouse gas emissions, because the majority of the emissions come through disruptions or interruptions to our production. The other side of it we are also seeing where AI can help us is in our ability to be able to navigate our supply of renewable energy. Much better predictability of, for example, offshore wind capacity, so that we can then gear the overall energy system in that location to be able to actually leverage what renewable energy can offer us. And so all of those elements are allowing us to move up the curve. But I do think it's fair to say that at least for the foreseeable future, there will be a lot more demand for AI, demand for energy from AI, rather than what AI is going to be giving to reduce energy demand, simply because there is a voracious appetite to consume that energy and really get the data centers to be able to be up to the spec that is required for the future.
And before I turn to Bashir to talk about Nigeria, I want to stay on this AI topic and ask Amin, for views on how you're using it in the company, and if you will, talk also about AC growth for energy demand.
By the way, AC growth not on developing countries. You need it also in Europe. You can see with the heat waves, and every time I come to Europe, I look at buildings and see how many ACs are being installed to manage what's happening. But before I talk about AI, I would like to address the scenarios, and these give a wrong sense of security over the longer term. And if we don't take into consideration, while it gives us certain type of security, because through policies and insisting on certain type of energies to give you the security that you need in your country, because you don't have oil and gas, and you need some type of security through either solar, wind, or hydrogen, or other things. You need to manage the cost, and that's what we are seeing. And in Europe, for example, the cost of energy as they introduce more renewable is going up. And you can learn from that, when you look at how much renewable is coming into the market and how much is the cost of energy or power in Europe is going up to the customers. So this needs to be taken into consideration when people build up for scenarios. One of the scenarios talk about 50% by 2050 will be coming from renewables. That is not correct, because if you look at 30 years ago, 83% of the energy mixes come from hydrocarbon, and today it's 80%. So it went down, but in reality, it's 100 million barrels of oil equivalent more. The base is getting bigger. So when we talk today, 5% of the alternatives of the primary energy, the base is going to get bigger with time, not smaller. And for that 5% or 10% will be much more. So you need more energy, and you need it from all sectors. You cannot be, if you need security, you need to take care of affordability. Going back to your question about AI, like Wael and Mary mentioned, we invested a long time. We had 350 scientists in data. We invested on them a long time ago. We trained 6,000 of our employees on AI, and we do have the computing infrastructure. You need a computing infrastructure to be available. You need the expertise to be available, and you need to have the quality of data to get the benefits of AI. And as a result of all of these investment, we are looking at realized savings per year. We talked in 2023, $2 billion. In 24, $4 billion. This is the realized saving, mainly driven by AI and technologies. You look at seismic productivity, we were able to increase productivity significantly capitalizing on AI. Reduce seismic time requirement from months to weeks to days. You look at predictability of failures of equipment, managing our predictability of maintaining our equipments, which we have a lot of them, capitalizing on AI. There is a lot of areas. So the number of use cases in Aramco used to be 50, grow to close to 500 use cases. Some of the use cases, the saving is in billions of dollars each. But each use case is a project with a milestone delivery, and the team is given the right resources to deliver. But you need to train your people to be AI enabled, and they all need to be that. Also, you need to have the computing infrastructure. If you don't have the computing infrastructure available in your company, you cannot achieve or realize the saving from AI. If you ask me about how much, everybody talks about 2%, I would say it's more 3% of the power generation today is AI, data centers, and crypto. By 2030, it will double. So it's 2 to 3% today. It's going to be 4 to 6% by 2030. But it is well worth it, because AI will help us to reduce cost and reduce emission. So the additional power that would be required, it will be well used.
Sheikh Nawaf on AI and energy.
Sure. Moving on that same front, adding a little bit more flesh on especially the use of AI for seismic interpretation, data analysis, and delivering. We've been producing oil and gas in Kuwait for more than 8 decades. Almost all of that was onshore in Kuwait. Only in the past couple of years have we moved offshore in Kuwait proper. We've now drilled 3 wells with the benefit of analysis using AI and other technologies. We announced the first 2 wells as major discoveries, the first one being equivalent to 3 years of production of the entire state of Kuwait from one field. The second one, quite sizable. The third one we will announce very shortly. So we're still, as they say, we're batting 1,000 on that. And a lot of that is driven by data and analytics, being able to place the well in the right location, being able to see the seismic interpretation much faster than it would normally have taken place. At the same time, we're using that to help with our innovation as we go towards Scope 1 and Scope 2 net zero emissions. On Scope 1, we're really working very hard to reach that goal. One of the examples, for example, we've used the innovation to reduce our gas flaring from somewhere around 16-17% about 15 to 20 years ago to less than 1/2% of gas being flared, and that is just only for safety purposes. So we would, at that metric, we would be considered a worldwide industry leader in terms of gas flaring, and that's because gas is a now dear commodity that we need within Kuwait. Moving on that gas to power generation, the state of Kuwait has partnered now with Google and is also partnering with Microsoft on data storage and also on AI implementation across the sectors in Kuwait. But when you look at it, the entire country uses about 16-17 gigawatts of power. The oil sector in Kuwait, the entire oil sector, from upstream to the 3 refineries we have, the petrochemicals, everything else, total it all up, we're about 10% of the country, so we're about 1.7 gigawatts. From what I understand is that these data centers, when you start building them out, each of them, depending on their size, will probably use up about 2 gig of power. Pretty much the entire oil sector in Kuwait, all of KPC and its operations. So that is going to take a lot of investment in power generation, and that's why we're developing more gas in Kuwait and also deploying solar. And we have the ability in KPC right now. We have a plan to completely offset our Scope 2 emissions by building out, investing into solar power generation, using the grid as a backup so that we can avoid the intermittency and latency issues, and offset completely our power needs only with solar.
To conclude the panel, I want to go back to Bashir, because you are the new member of this group, very recent CEO in MPC. Goldman Sachs just released a report saying that Nigeria, by 2075, will be the world's 5th largest economy, ahead of Germany, Japan, and Russia. So I'm wondering if you can give us an update on NNPC's plans and maybe even the country and the continent's plans to supply this energy to grow the Nigerian economy and the African economy.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. I think I need to start by saying that, as my minister Heineken mentioned earlier on, what's happening in Nigeria gives a good representation of the dynamics in sub-Saharan Africa. And I will start by saying the evolution has started. Few years ago, I think 2022, there was a new policy issued in Nigeria, the Petroleum Industry Act. After several years of feedback from investor community about stability of the fiscal environment, stability of predictability of the investment environment, so that lifted quite a major uncertainty. Subsequently to that, we've had a major review of all our production sharing agreements with a view to make them more investable and also providing stability for investors. That has happened. But I think in recent times, if you listen to a lot of feedback that we've heard about Nigeria and what has been impeding investment, there are two fundamental aspects. One of them was around security. I think it's known to everybody that the pipeline security and attacks has been a major concern for investors. And the other areas around NNPC itself, around being a very viable national oil company. Now, the PIA actually transformed NNPC from a corporation like any other corporation in the country to a limited liability company. That journey has started over the last 2 years. And the import of that journey is that prior to that, every revenue from NNPC goes into the state government. And for any investment we needed to do in NNPC, we then have to get allocation like any other ministry. What the PIA has done is to free us from that. We are now able to go to market and attract our own investment as any other private company. The implications of that is that I can say over the last 9 months, unlike in the past where you hear all IOC partners complaining about inability of NNPC to pay its cash call, we've achieved 100% cash call, which means that NNPC, following the PIA, we are able to attract our own investment and we are able to make commitments around. The second point is around the security, and I think that's also very important. There's been major government interventions and private sector interventions in restructuring the whole security infrastructure. Unlike in the past where the security protection for assets was left to the operators, the government took a very bold step in 2023 to institute a new surveillance system, leveraging drone technology, leveraging AI as applicable to provide a more holistic surveillance across the Niger Delta. I'm glad to report that as of June, we achieved 100% availability of all our pipelines. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So three things coming together. We now have a more stable fiscal environment and law, allowing investment. We have an NNPC that has been relieved of the shackles of being part of typical sort of government financing. We are now going to the market to attract our finance, and the security environment is been lifted. So we're open for business. And what is also very important, I think is important to say, that most people will have watched over the last couple of years, most IOCs have started to migrate out of the onshore, like you've seen maybe in the North Sea in many years, in the Texas, those days in mature basins, are handed over to independent companies, and are now focusing on deep water. So what we're seeing in the last year, and quite intense right now, is that the IOCs are now coming back with very interesting investment in the deep water. It's great to see Wael here. He just took an FID on Bonga North, about $5 billion, and I was already discussing with him about the next $10 billion investment, and I'll be having further discussion with Patrick. So the deal is different, the landscape is different. The deep water investment is now open, and we're having good discussions. But unlike, also similar to what has happened in the history of mature basins in other parts of the world, now that the IOCs have handed over these mature onshore assets to independent, what we're seeing is that these independent are increasing production significantly because they're more intimate with the solutions of these mature assets with lower cost of capital. I think the last bit I wanted to talk about is the whole conversations again around the whole energy transition. What does it mean for Nigeria and the sub-Saharan Africa? What is happening now is it is not an alternative for us. When we talk about energy security and affordability of energy, it's not optional. We don't have anywhere to go. So what it means is that you must have heard of the Dangote refinery. We're also beginning to see major growth in gas-based industries right now across West Africa. You must have heard about the West African gas pipeline. We are also taking the gas pipeline up to Morocco. That project is also ongoing. So there are quite a lot of internal utilization within Africa of actually ensuring this issue of energy security. We confront it because it's clear that that help is not going to come from anywhere. Yeah. Unless we have a commercially viable investment, we are not going to be able to attract this. So now we are doing almost maybe 6 million barrels per day, standard cubic feet per day of gas to gas-based industry just in Nigeria. We're beginning to increase the export into the West African region on the West African gas pipeline. That availability has increased significantly, and we're seeing further uptakes. And we hope that by next year, we'll be doubling that gas-based industry. So the story for energy security for Africa is around this development in the gas-based industry. It's not an optional for us.
Well,
and refineries as well.
Such a great update on what's going on at NNPC and in Nigeria. And we're standing between lunch, so I want to end the session. A very good panel. If I can ask everyone to show your appreciation to our great panelists.